I'm going to teach you the basics of manual mode on any camera. And the top 3 things up here are going to be the most important. So we're going to start off with shutter speed. Now, shutter speed is the amount of time that light is being let through. So the faster the shutter speed, the less light is being brought through, and the slower the shutter speed, the more light is being brought through. So for a slower shutter speed, this is intended for very dimly lit settings, or even if you're shooting at night. And then the faster shutter speeds are intended for very sunny days when maybe your photos would look more overexposed. Usually, if you have the correct aperture though, you should be anywhere around like 125 to 250 if it's like a normal day. Now, we're gonna look at aperture. The aperture is the opening at which light passes through. So, the smaller the aperture, the more wide open the aperture. And the larger the aperture, the more closed, or the less light is being brought through. Higher apertures are used for landscapes, things that you want the whole entire thing in focus, whereas smaller apertures are used for something like portraits, where you get that really nice effect in the background where everything is blurry except for your subject right in the front. So, usually between shutter speed and aperture, you kind of have to fix it so then if you're at a smaller f-stop, you're probably going to want a faster shutter speed. Now, if you were going to use a larger aperture, you might want to slow down the shutter speed. It's letting less light in the aperture and more light in the shutter speed. And basically, ISO, which is over here, is just light sensitivity. So if you were in a scene where it's very dark and you can't fix it with aperture or shutter speed, you can bring up the ISO, which will make dark indoor scenes brighter. However, it will start to look grainy, so I usually like to keep mine around 200. And that's basically it.
Hello! Today I'll be talking about some basic rules of photography as well as some tips and tricks. First is the rule of thirds. With this, you want to imagine these lines and to keep your subject along the vertical lines and the horizon line parallel with either the bottom or top line. This is really great for landscapes. Now we have limiting focus. This is a good technique for portraits and when you really want to make your subject pop. It allows you to keep your subject in focus while the background is blurred, and you can achieve this with a low aperture. It also depends on how close you get to your subject, which will make it more blurred the closer you get. Next is framing. This is where you can use the environment to naturally frame your subject. It can be in doorways or with mirrors or picture frames, anything. And it can be a cool way to make your photos more interesting. An important tip is to make sure your space is decluttered before a photo. You want to be aware of what's going to be in the frame, like making sure no odds and ends are in the background. This will make your photos look clean and appealing. Lighting is another important tip. You can use reflectors or artificial light, and when used correctly, it can add contrast in your photo, contour the face in a portrait, as well as set the tone. You can also get creative with color lighting. And generally, just be creative. This is an art form, but it's important to have fun and think outside the box. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to pet your models.
So you're going to want to take out your camera, where you can find the SD card at the bottom. Go ahead and put the SD card into wherever the slot is on your computer. Now you're going to want to locate where the photos are in your computer based off of how the SD card is set up. Next, you're going to open Photoshop and then open your photo into Photoshop. Once you have Photoshop open, you're going to want to unlock the image so you can do whatever you want. In the Adjustments tab to the right, you can adjust coloration, saturation, hue, etc. to change the image's appearance. Over to the left is your toolbar. This consists of the crop tool, the paintbrush, the eraser tool, and so much more. Down in the bottom right corner is where you can find the Layers tab. You want to make sure you're on a completely different layer so you aren't altering the actual picture below. So if you don't like what you've done, you can simply delete the layer, and the original image isn't altered. What you're seeing now is a quick editing sequence. You can do anything in Photoshop. Whatever comes to mind, you can do it. There are so many tools that allow you to express your imagination right on the screen. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, so whatever looks good to you is going to be a good photo. Whether it's inverted, whether it's a slight discoloration, however you want the photo to turn out, that's what you can do. There is no wrong way to edit a photo unless you have specific guidelines that you have to follow. Make sure that you learn all about your tools so you know exactly what you can do. And make sure to have fun. Now here's a quick before and after of two photos that I edited using different effects.